I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
If Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Big moments in debates past. Let's talk about debates future with our roundtable right now. And Maggie Haberman of Politico. Let me begin with you in this whole question about how much the debates really matter. You see the moments that come out of them, but how much difference do they really made?
They can sometimes make a huge difference. I think for Mitt Romney especially, this is his last chance to try to change the arc of this campaign. The risk for Romney in not doing well on Wednesday night is that people won't tune in to the later debates. I think people are not sure how interested they are in this race. I think there's not a whole lot of enthusiasm on either side, frankly. And I think that if Mitt Romney doesn't do something to make himself seem serious and also hope for an Obama mistake, I think it becomes very diminishing returns. Governor
Barbour, do you agree with Chris Christie saying that Governor Romney has to shake things up on Wednesday night?
Well, certainly Governor Romney needs to get this campaign focused on issues, policies, Obama's policies and the failures of those policies, and his alternatives and why they would do better. There's been virtually no talk about that in this campaign. If this campaign turns to that, that's hugely to Romney's advantage, and that's what he needs to focus on.
To make that work, does he have to give out more details Wednesday night than we've seen so far?
It's interesting to me to hear you guys talk about detail. I didn't hear any of that in 2008. When Barack Obama said in 2008, my plan will lower your health insurance premium for the average family by $2,500, well, okay. Well, actually, the Kaiser Family Foundation announced last week, since he's been president and since Obamacare was adopted, family insurance premium gone up $3,000. But nobody asks, well, now, Senator Obama, how are you going to do that?
I think
it's
there might have been some questions.
It's not normal.
You know, I think all of us start talking about that Mitt Romney needs to shake up this race and change the dynamic, which obviously the poll numbers show that that's the case. And as I said just previously, it's likely to change anyway, even just with a modest debate performance, because this race is a two-point race. I don't think we also can take away the pressure that's on the president in this debate, because I remember full well in 2004, George W. Bush was 6 or 7 points ahead of John Kerry. He didn't prepare well. He came across as slightly impatient, didn't really feel like he wanted to be there. He's the president of the United States. Why am I debating this guy? Why am I doing this? And that race went from a 6 or 7 point race to a 1 point race in 48 hours. I think Barack Obama's got to be careful, not sort of policy specifically, but we all know he's smart, that he doesn't come across as irritable, impatient, why am I here, and sort of basically...
Or running out the clock.
It performs well from a mannerism standpoint, because if he doesn't, and this race goes to a 1 point race, we're all going to be sitting around saying, what happened?
Donna, Brazile, Matt Dowd brings up the mannerisms. You were in the debate camp of Al Gore in 2000, and I know for a fact that everyone in your team thought he cleaned George Bush's clock in that debate, but on mannerisms and the takeaway, he ended up losing.
Well, George, many of us remember the split screen, and Al Gore was sitting there, rolling his eyes, perhaps, looking at George Bush, and basically he started to sigh.
So does President Obama have that vulnerability?
Oh, look, I think, first of all, Mitt Romney speaks in perfect sound bites. Perfect sound bites. I attended many of those Republican debates, and one of the things that he's very good at is turning a negative question, a question directed at him, into a positive question and making it a negative question on his opponent. He's a very skillful debater. He's been in dress rehearsal now for 5 years. So I suspect Mitt Romney is going to come well prepared to put the president on defense. But I think the president understands that Mitt Romney is going to come there loaded for bear to try to make this, again, about President Obama. And what the president will have to do early on is to jumpstart this the way you would do a jump ball and make sure that Mitt Romney never get the ball back.
So go on the attack. And Governor Dean, some of the other things working in Romney's favor, I think, coming into this, the challenger almost always does well in this first debate.
2 weeks ago, he was on a talk show, and I thought he did a fantastic job sticking to his talking points. He really is prepared, and he does speak in sound bites, and he's very, very good at this. This isn't part of the campaign spin, because I can't stand this, oh, my candidate, woe is me stuff. But he is well prepared, and he's going to do well. The key to a debate, if you want to see how it moves the American people, is to turn off the sound. Watch the mannerisms. It's not what they say. I mean, there may be a zinger, and that could change things. But it's not what they say. It is their mannerisms. It's how they come across. And what the president has to, I agree with this idea, the president has to avoid being irritable. He's just got to roll with the punches. Mitt's going to be out there. He's going to be aggressive as all get out. He's going to try to put him off balance. The president's just got to be the president. This is the guy who killed Osama bin Laden. I think he could probably stand up to Mitt Romney, but he's got to relax. He's got to show it. He's got to show it a little sense of humor. He's got to show why he's likable. And that's all non-verbal cues.
I generally take the point on mannerisms, but Maggie Haberman, doesn't Mitt Romney also in this debate needs to have a moment that dominates news coverage in the days coming out? Because that's how most people are going to get their information from this debate, even if it's a huge 50, 60 million person audience.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to Governor Dean's point, though, I agree that I think there is a concern for the president in not looking like Mitt Romney is getting to him, not having a "you're likable enough" Hillary moment like he did in the 2008 debate.
Let's show some of that. We have a little montage of the best and worst moments of each candidate in their debates.
I'll tell you what. 10,000 bucks? $10,000 bet?
I'm not in the betting business.
He's very likable. I agree with that. I don't think I'm that bad.
You're likable enough.
Thank you so much.
The idea that I'm anti-immigrant is repulsive. Don't use a term like that.
When the war started, you said it was going to be quick and easy. You said we knew where the weapons of mass destruction were. You were wrong.
One of the things you see there, Governor Barbour, is that each candidate is much better when they are on offense, sort of in a concerted attack. But, you know, one of the things we're seeing telegraphed by the Romney camp is this idea that Governor Romney may call President Obama out on not telling the truth in his answers. Do you think that's a wise strategy?
Well, if the campaign's not about truth, Obama's got a huge advantage. I mean, the facts, Chris Christie was on there earlier, the facts of what's happening in America, the reduction of America's standing in the world, the reduction of middle-class prosperity in the world, the idea that health care costs are going up, health care premiums are going up. The Federal Reserve Board, for the first time in its 100-year history, it's Barack Obama's Federal Reserve Board, says the economy is so bad, Obama's policies are so bad, they're going to have a job creation, unprecedented job creation program. You know, that gets announced. Nobody says, what does that mean? It means his own Federal Reserve Board is giving up on this program.
The best thing I think that could happen in this debate is if actually, in the course of these debates, if its truth is on trial, actually, on both sides of this. Because if you look at all the ads that have been run and everything that has been said, both sides have a really incapacity to really tell the truth to the American public. Both sides are unwilling to say, we're going to have to do a shared sense of sacrifice. We're going to have to taxes have to be included, expenditures have to be included. Mitt Romney has run away from the truth. He puts Paul Ryan on the ticket. They're going to have a big conversation about entitlements and Medicare and what we're going to do. We have it for 48 hours. They realize it's not a good idea, and he never talks about it again.
But let me just stop you there. If truth is going to be on trial, isn't that going to have to be up to the candidates? I don't believe the moderators who've been chosen or the mandate they have is to be fact checkers in this debate. It may be wrong, but it doesn't appear to be.
Well, that's part of the problem in this environment that we're in, because everybody wants to, just as we saw what happened in the Middle East and in Libya, everybody views the truth through their own prism and doesn't accept reality if it disagrees with where they are. I don't think the moderator is going to do that. I think both sides are going to accuse the other sides of not sharing the facts. One person won't release his tax return. The other person won't be honest with the American public about the really status of where we are in the economy and whether or not we're going to be able to move through it. They're both going to do that. But at some point, somebody's got to call it on it and say each side has a great, as I say, a great incapacity to tell the truth to the American public.
Who's going to make that decision is the voters. I mean, and I don't think it's going to happen until after the election. I think the voters are going to start penalizing people who don't cooperate. I mean, just to throw in a little partisan barb, the Republicans wouldn't pass Obama's jobs bill. That would have given us 2 million more jobs. So this is not a record. This is not about Obama's record. This is about what's going on in Washington. People are sick of it. And the question is, who do you trust more to end that? And I think the odds are now with Obama, because people see Obama as having tried, at least, to work with the other side. I think we are going to get to a better place, but I think it's going to be after the elections when the voters start penalizing people for being obstructionists.
And this is the difficulty, you know, always with Governor Romney, is that, you know, he wants to come across as someone who can work with the other side. And of course, during the Republican primary, he was the hardliner, he was a severe conservative. I expect on Wednesday night, Governor Romney will go back to being the moderate governor of Massachusetts, talk a little bit about insuring people so that he can try to show people that he cares about them. And of course, he's going to talk about, well, you know, he worked with Ted Kennedy. This is a governor who's going to try to move the ball just a little bit back to the center so that he can look more acceptable.
Let me ask Governor Barbour about that. Do you think that Governor Romney should have moved more quickly to get to that place in the middle, and why didn't he?
Well, I can't answer your question, but Romney just needs to be Romney. I mean, that's what he needs to do. He needs to come forward with the policies. And Matthew said something I think is very important. The idea that this is going to be a campaign about big issues would help Romney if they would have just stuck to it. Start with it, stick to it. I thought picking Ryan was a very bright thing to do because there hadn't been a campaign since 1980 that the Democrats didn't have a Medicare campaign, that they didn't say the Republicans are against Medicare. Get somebody out there and let's talk to the American people about Medicare and they'll understand. We have to do something.
And I think that their biggest mistake the Romney campaign has made is they've gone small ball and in the weeds, which is fed right into the Obama campaign's wheelhouse on this. It's more small ball. If they had raised this up and say, let's have a debate about the philosophy of government, even if it's something they thought there were things that are impossible, let's say, let's debate the philosophy of government. Here's our philosophy. Here's his philosophy. This is the difference. You make the choice.
I hate to say this, but I think small ball is Mitt Romney's the way Mitt Romney thinks, and what you're seeing is a reflection of the candidate, and that's the problem.
You know, you say that, and you both have raised two questions that I want to get to. First, when you talk about this small ball, I talked to Governor Christie about that. Also, the Weekly Standard this week came out with a flyer that the Romney campaign is sending out in Northern Virginia. I want to put up on the screen right now. It's a flyer basically about how the Romney campaign is going to do a better job of making sure that people who have Lyme disease get better treatment. This is something we were all talking about before we came on. Surprising to you?
Very surprising to me. Not surprising in the context of the fact that this campaign has had trouble sticking to a singular message, a singular narrative, and driving it. Surprising mostly because this has not been a thing that people are screaming about in the election. We're not hearing a lot about Lyme disease, and it's not really clear entirely how it came out. It seems like it was from someone who was on the Romney campaign bus at one point when he was in Virginia. But I do think, you know, in terms of small ball, I think there has been a lot of, you're seeing the tactics. They're very visible from the Romney campaign. And part of it has been because they keep talking about doing a messaging reset, and then they don't do it. So we see lots of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
You know, having been obviously probably one of the people that's called the creator of micro-targeting, which we did for the first time in really campaigns in 2004, there's been a total misread of what that is. There's this idea that you do all this thing and you do all this slicing and dicing and then find out for some weird particular issue, whether it's Lyme disease or some other issue, and then you go straight to these people that you find in some household somewhere and do that. What micro-targeting, the best use of micro-targeting is this. You find individuals that you otherwise couldn't have found in areas that you normally wouldn't campaign in, and then go to those people with big issues. So you find the individuals.
Not the small
Not the small issues. You find the individual, and then you take a big issue. The presidential races, Lyme disease is a city council campaign or an assembly race. People in presidential races want conversations about big stuff on big things. But micro-targeting works if you find the person and then deliver a big message. But
there's a smaller and smaller slice of the electorate that's open to these ideas, and if you're not running a big picture campaign, if you're just basically slicing the electorate into these little small micro units, then you're really not reaching the mass audience where people, when they get on the bus, they're talking about you. When they go to the barbershop or the beauty parlor, you're the conversation. This type of campaign that Mitt Romney is running, it is just a very localized campaign, and you don't hear anything big. I was down in Southwest Virginia, of all places, thinking that, oh my God, I'm about to talk about coal or all these other issues. No, they're not talking about that. They want to talk about the economy. They want to talk about jobs. But Mitt Romney has not even, in an area that is very hospitable to the Romney campaign, they're not even talking about local
Let's pick up on the point that Governor Barbour made, though. You said one of the big moves that he's made is picking Paul Ryan. And there's some evidence this week, you know, it did energize conservatives, but this Medicare campaign has backfired. I want to show the polling from the Washington Post this week, looking at the battleground states of Ohio, Florida, and Virginia, up 19 points on Medicare in Ohio, 15 points in Florida, 13 points in Virginia, Governor Dean. The Medicare campaign seems to be working.
It is. I talked to a Republican from Florida the other day who's in a position to know this stuff, and he says that they're getting crushed on Medicare in Florida. And that's because Paul Ryan gave us the opening for that. Not that we wouldn't have used it anyway, but Paul Ryan really gave us the opening because he actually is on record essentially saying we're going to voucherize Medicare. That's a fact. And, you know, whether it's for 55-year-olds or 65-year-olds gets lost in the argument. and it's really transformed the race in Florida. We went from a 20-point deficit among seniors to a 4-point deficit among seniors. It's unbelievable.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, excuse me, if you're going to pick Paul Ryan and you're going to make Medicare an issue, then you got to stick with it. The more information the American people have about Medicare, the more they understand why the Republicans are right. When Democrats tell you we're going to keep Medicare just like it is forever and ever, that simply can't be done. The president himself said in 2009, Medicare and Medicaid are unsustainable as they are now. The actuaries for Medicare say Medicare is unsustainable. We got to do something. The question is what? And Obama's answer is, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to talk about that after the election. Ryan has been very open. You know, we're going to give you Medicare that is like the health insurance congressmen get.
What's the impact?
Nobody believes it, though.
I totally agree with the governor on this, is that when you do this kind of thing, you have to stick, you have to double down on it. And you can't just throw it out there, because if you throw it out there and don't do it, it's like chum in the water of sharks. When you do that, if you have to say, basically say, this is maybe unpopular, we may not be able to sustain this, but this is who we are, and we have to make this argument.
Here's the problem with this.
The Ryan budget at this hour.
This is the problem. People
really
fundamentally, this is one of the basic rules which you'll recognize about campaigns, is campaigns are not for education. They are for winning. You do the education after. If you run a campaign based on, I know you do, but if you run a campaign on educating people, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 you lose the campaign. You may win the issue later on, but you lose the campaign, and that's exactly what's happening here.
If you tell people that this is going to be a campaign about educating people, and then don't educate them, then I think that is a losing proposition.
I was just going to say, if you know the other side is going to unload of you on Medicare, because they have every presidential campaign since 1980. It beat Bob Dole. Bob Dole never got above 43% in any poll. And it was primarily because of what we call the Medicare campaign. It's coming, and so Republicans make the choice, we're just going to take it like a man, get our head beat in, or we're going to fight back and try to fight back to a draw.
But Haley, in 2010, you guys ran that campaign against Democrats, and I think you were successful. That's why you took back the House. Look, if you unleash the Ryan budget on the American people right now, Mitt Romney will be down at 30%.
I want to turn to foreign policy before we go, because we did see a pretty big moment this week at the UN General Assembly. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went up before the General Assembly. We saw that cartoon right there you see it right there, talking about Iran's nuclear capability. At some point, he draws the red line, getting a lot of attention from Jon Stewart and others for that cartoon. But he also had a new assessment of when Iran would reach the moment where they would have a nuclear capability.
By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage.
Matthew Dowd, in some ways, I thought this was the biggest political news of the week. We've talked a lot about X factors that could affect the campaign in the final days. What you saw from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu right there is saying, basically, that there is not going to be a military attack between now and the election.
Traditionally, which I've always said, is that September of campaigns are the month of mistakes, which we saw this year, which what happened with the 47% video and various other things that happened. And October are usually the month of debates, but what usually changes elections fundamentally are the things that are the unknown unknowns, I guess, as Donald Rumsfeld has said, is those things that we have no idea out there that sort of basically force a position of a president or a challenger to deal with it in this case. I think actually Benjamin Netanyahu got way out over his skis on this.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and over the course of this, and I think over the last 48 hours has begun to pull back and say maybe I should go back to be Israel and leave the presidential race up to the 2 candidates that are in the presidential race. But I think we have 38 days left. There is still something going to happen in the course of this race. It's going to cause a focus on these 2 men as what kind of leader they are that we are unaware of.
So does that mean, perhaps, Governor Barbour, that Mitt Romney should maybe turn the race more to foreign policy in this last 37 days?
No. I think the American people are focused on the lack of jobs, the loss of income, the poor prospects. They are concerned that America's lost standing in the world. They're concerned at how backwards the Middle East has gone in the last year. But they are much more concerned about their children having jobs, about them being able to pay for their health insurance, $3.85 gasoline. They're much more concerned about that than they are about foreign policy. And that is why, Romney has got to continue to put the spotlight back on the results of Obama's policies, which are very poor, and what he would do different that would be more promising.
Go ahead.
I would agree with the first thing. He shouldn't focus on foreign policy, and the last, he's got to put his focus back on domestic. But I think our standing in the world has improved remarkably when you think of where George Bush was when he left office, first of all. Second of all, the Arab Spring revolutions have mostly been successful. It turns out that, as you know, the Libyan people rebelled against the terrorists that attacked our embassy, that we have an elected president who may or may not be our pal in Egypt, but we have an democratically elected president in Egypt, and in Tunisia we're doing the same thing. This president has improved our standing remarkably in the world because he's actually listened to other people for the first time.
Maggie Haberman, the race almost certain, as Matt Dowd talked about, to tighten before Election Day. But this year could be different in a couple of ways. Number one, this is the most partisan, locked-in electorate that we've ever seen. Very, very few undecideds. It could be as low as 4% or lower right now. Secondly, with more early voting this year than ever before, by the time the candidates get to the third debate, you could have had a third of the country already voting in the battleground states.
This is a real concern to the Romney campaign. I mean, early voting has begun within this 2-week window after the 47% video coming out. I think some of the dips you're seeing in the polls potentially in the last week have been related to that. From internal tracking, I'm hearing from both sides, there was a decrease for Governor Romney after that. So yes, this is a big concern, which is why it makes the debates much more important. I do think there will be some intervening event, and we don't know what it is yet.
So, Governor Barbour, we got about 30 seconds left. You get the last word. How does Mitt Romney peel away voters who right now say they're going to vote for President Obama?
He has to get them back focused on the reality of Obama's policies, the failures of those policies, and then offer them what he would do and why that would be better for their families, their communities, and our country. Pretty simple. It's not rocket science.
And we will all be watching Wednesday night. Thanks for a terrific roundtable to all of you. And for all of you at home who want to weigh in, Governors Barbour and Dean will answer your questions on Twitter, at Haley Barbour and at Howard Dean. Just use the hashtag #ThisWeek.
At Governor Howard Dean.
At Governor Howard Dean.
G-O-V Howard Dean.